Welcome to the Black Cultural Center for Nova Scotia, the destination for the discovery of African Nova Scotian culture and heritage. Established in 1983 by the Black Cultural Society of Nova Scotia, led by Reverend Dr. William Purley Oliver, the center has a mandate to protect, preserve, and promote a unique history that spans well over 400 years in this province. The center is the first and largest museum dedicated to Black history in Canada. The center is a community-operated, government-funded provincial museum and cultural center that welcomes patrons of all ages year-round to discover an important part of Nova Scotia, or shall we say, Canada's diverse history. Nova Scotia has over 52 historic Black communities that go back several generations, making Nova Scotia the birthplace of Black culture and heritage in Canada.
The importance of our history in relation to in Canada is...
Well, the Black Culture Center represents the history of Nova Scotia and all the Black communities in the province of Nova Scotia.
It speaks to African ancestry from the planters when they got here, including Matt DaCosta, to all those folks who came forward.
And being a founding member of the Black Culture Center, I am so excited to see this Culture Center come to a fruition with the history and the knowledge that they're able to produce and to educate our youth, and not only the youth, the total community.
Oftentimes when people refer to our history, it's often an add-on or an addition to, but we are very much ingrained in the fabric of the province and the country of Canada.
Not only is it important to understand that, it speaks to the contributions of people of African ancestry across the province of Nova Scotia, the many trials that they've had to go through to maintain either democracy, through education, through justice, and social justice issues that are still going on to this day.
The history of African Nova Scotians reaches back to the early founding years of the province of Nova Scotia. Many of today's communities can trace their origins to centuries ago, when Nova Scotia held the promise of a better life for people of African descent. Explorer Matthew DaCosta is credited with being the first to arrive as part of an expedition that founded Port Royal in 1605. In the 1700s, small populations of French and English Black settlers were part of colonial towns such as Louisbourg and early Halifax. The first large group of migrants were the Black Loyalists, who came as refugees after the American Revolution between 1782 and 1785. About 3,500 people settled through Nova Scotia. They were Blacks in the American colonies who opted to side with the British during the United States War for Independence because the British offered protection, freedom, land, and rations in return for support. Other Blacks would come to Nova Scotia in the 1780s as the property of white loyalists. Some were slaves, others were indentured servants, though there was not much difference between the two categories. When the war ended in 1783, New York was the last British-held port. It became the departure point for thousands of loyalists, Black and white. British officials drew up a detailed list of all the Blacks who were leaving. That list, the Book of Negroes, stated whether the person was free, a slave, or an indentured servant, and what their military service had been. Through great struggle and adversity, people of African descent made Nova Scotia home, contributing to the fabric of the development of Canada. Discover the journey of trailblazers like entrepreneur and civil rights icon Viola Desmond, who was a trailblazing businesswoman who took a stand for her rights. In 2018, she became Canada's first Black person and first non-royal woman to be featured on a banknote. Seaman William Hall, whose heroic efforts honored him with the Victoria Cross for Valor. He was the first Black person, the first Nova Scotian, and one of the first Canadians to receive the British Empire's highest award for bravery. In 2015, it was announced that a new naval class ship will bear his name, the HMCS William Hall. Nova Scotian operatic contralto Portia White broke the color barrier to become the first Black Canadian concert singer to win international acclaim. Considered one of the best classical singers of the 20th century, her voice was described by one critic as a gift from heaven. And she was often compared to the celebrated African-American contralto Marian Anderson. Today, a postage stamp and Performing Arts Award bears her name. African Nova Scotians made a significant contribution to the First World War. Nova Scotia is the home of one of Canada's best-kept military secrets, the No. 2 Construction Battalion, Canada's first and only all-black regiment. Over half of the 600-plus member battalion were from Nova Scotia. A historic site and annual remembrance ceremony honor them, lest we forget. The Black Cultural Center is filled with many stories such as these that are waiting to be discovered. Explore African Nova Scotian culture and history, and be inspired.